Imagine this. You're at work and your boss suddenly criticizes you in front of your colleagues. Your heart pounds, your face flushes, and your mind races with anger, embarrassment, or even self-doubt. A dozen responses rush through your head. Maybe you want to defend yourself, shut down, or even lash out. Now, let's press pause. What if, instead of reacting impulsively, you could remain calm, collected, and in control? What if you could respond thoughtfully instead of emotionally, turning the situation into an opportunity for growth rather than regret? This is what true emotional mastery looks like. And it's not about suppressing your feelings. It's about understanding them, embracing them, and learning to use them as a source of strength rather than suffering. For over 2,500 years, Buddhist teachings have offered profound yet practical methods for emotional regulation. These techniques, from mindfulness meditation to detachment, gratitude, and self-awareness, aren't just spiritual ideas, they're scientifically backed habits that can change the way you respond to the world. Think about it. What if you could face life's difficulties with the same serenity as a Zen master? Imagine how much stress, frustration, and anxiety you could let go of. That's exactly what we're exploring today. Let's begin. 1. Embrace mindfulness, the foundation of emotional stability. I once heard someone say the longest journey you'll ever take is the one from your head to your heart. At the time, I didn't fully understand it. But as life unfolded, through moments of stress, loss, and overwhelming uncertainty, I began to see how true it was. Have you ever found yourself so caught up in your thoughts that you barely noticed the world around you? Maybe you were replaying an argument from yesterday or worrying about a future that hadn't even happened yet. And before you knew it, the day had slipped away, lost in a blur of distractions and anxieties. I get it. I've been there too. There was a time in my life when I was always rushing to the next task, the next goal, the next stage of life. I convinced myself that being busy meant being productive, and being productive meant being valuable. But deep down, I felt exhausted. No matter how much I accomplished, there was always a lingering sense of unease, like I was chasing something I couldn't quite catch. Then one day, everything changed. I was sitting in a coffee shop, laptop open, drowning in emails, when I looked up and noticed an old man sitting by the window. He wasn't looking at his phone, or reading, or even talking to anyone. He was just sitting there, sipping his coffee, watching the world go by with the most serene expression on his face. And I thought, when was the last time I just sat and truly existed in the moment? The first time I tried practicing mindfulness, I failed miserably. I remember sitting cross-legged on the floor, closing my eyes, and trying to focus on my breath. Within seconds, my mind was off on a wild tangent. Did I reply to that email? I need to pick up groceries. What if I forgot something important? It was frustrating. I had expected some instant enlightenment, a wave of peace washing over me. Instead, I felt restless. But then I remembered something a Buddhist monk once said: the mind is like a puppy. It wanders, it gets distracted, it chases after every noise. Your job is not to control it, but to gently bring it back. So I tried again, and again, and over time something shifted. I started noticing little things. The way sunlight felt on my skin, the way my coffee smelled, the sensation of my feet touching the ground as I walked. I learned to be where I was instead of constantly living in the past or the future. I won't say mindfulness changed my life overnight, but slowly it rewired the way I experienced the world. I think of someone like Steve Jobs, a man known for his visionary mind and relentless pursuit of innovation. Most people don't know this, but Jobs was deeply influenced by Zen Buddhism. He practiced mindfulness and credited it for his ability to focus, to see things clearly, and to strip away the unnecessary noise of life. He once said, if you just sit and observe, you will see how restless your mind is. But over time, it does calm, and when it does, there's room to hear more subtle things. That's when your intuition starts to blossom. That resonated with me deeply. How many times had I drowned out my own intuition with a mind that never stopped racing? One of the most powerful lessons I've learned is that mindfulness isn't about stopping your thoughts. It's about learning to notice them without letting them consume you. Think about the last time you were truly present. Maybe it was watching the ocean waves, listening to music that made your soul feel alive, or laughing with someone you love. In those moments, you weren't worried about the future or replaying the past. You were simply there. That's mindfulness. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that peace isn't something external. It's something you cultivate from within. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, try this. Pause. Breathe. Notice. Take 3 deep breaths and feel the air filling your lungs. Notice the sounds around you, the sensations in your body, the thoughts in your mind. Let them come and go like waves on the shore. Because right here, right now, in this very moment, you are enough. You don't need to be anywhere else. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly where peace begins. Before we part ways, I want to leave you with one question. What is one small moment today where you can practice being fully present? Maybe it's savoring your morning coffee instead of rushing through it. Maybe it's feeling the warmth of the sun on your skin. Maybe it's looking someone in the eyes and truly listening. Whatever it is, try it and see what happens. Because life isn't happening in the past. It's not waiting for you in the future. It's happening now, and you don't want to miss it. 2. Detachment, finding freedom from emotional suffering. I once heard someone say that most of our pain doesn't come from what happens to us, but from our resistance to what happens. At the time, I brushed it off as just another philosophical idea, something that sounded wise but had little to do with real life. But life, as it often does, had its own way of teaching me otherwise. There was a time when I held on too tightly to everything. Relationships, ambitions, even identities I had outgrown. I gripped them with both hands, terrified that if I let go, I would lose something irreplaceable. What I didn't realize was that the tighter I held on, the more I suffered. It took a painful lesson to open my eyes. I remember standing in the middle of my apartment after my first real heartbreak. The kind that makes your chest feel hollow, like a part of you has been ripped away. I had built my future around that relationship. I had mapped out every possibility, imagined every milestone. And then, just like that, it was gone. I did what most people do. I fought against reality. I replayed every conversation, analyzed every moment, wondering where I went wrong. I held on to the idea that if I just tried harder, if I just did something differently, maybe things wouldn't have fallen apart. But the truth was, it had already fallen apart. And no amount of wishing or clinging could change that. It was in the middle of that pain, when my thoughts were running in endless circles, that I stumbled upon a simple yet life-changing truth: nothing lasts forever. And that's okay. At first, I resisted it. Because deep down, I wanted permanence. I wanted guarantees. I wanted to believe that some things could last forever. But as time passed, I began to understand that the beauty of life isn't in holding on. It's in learning how to let go with grace. There's a story about the great Stoic philosopher Epictetus. He once said, when you kiss your child goodnight, whisper to yourself, they may not wake in the morning. Some might find this thought morbid, but it wasn't meant to be. He wasn't telling people to live in fear. He was reminding them to love fully without attachment. To appreciate the people and moments in our lives for what they are, rather than gripping them with the desperate need to keep them forever. Because everything is temporary. And that realization, rather than making life bleak, makes it infinitely more precious. Steve Jobs, one of the greatest visionaries of our time, understood this well. He famously said, remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. He knew that impermanence isn't something to fear. It's something that sets us free. And yet, as human beings, we resist it with everything we have. We hold on to relationships long past their expiration date because we fear loneliness more than we fear being with the wrong person. We chase after careers that no longer fulfill us because we're terrified of starting over. We cling to identities that no longer serve us because change feels too uncertain. But here's the thing, holding on doesn't stop things from changing. It only makes the transition more painful. I learned this the hard way. After my breakup, I did what many people do. I tried to fill the emptiness with distractions. I threw myself into work, into new friendships, into anything that kept me from sitting alone with my own thoughts. But avoidance is just another form of resistance. And it wasn't until I sat with my pain, really sat with it, that I began to heal. I started to understand that detachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring without attachment. It's about loving people fully without trying to own them. It's about pursuing dreams without letting them define your worth. It's about experiencing life without demanding that it always go your way. There's a well-known Buddhist analogy that explains this beautifully. Imagine you're holding a handful of sand. If you squeeze too tightly, the sand slips through your fingers. But if you hold it gently with an open palm, it stays. Life is the same way. The more we cling, the more we suffer. But when we learn to hold things lightly, to love, to appreciate, but not to possess, we find true freedom. I won't pretend that detachment is easy. It's not something you master overnight, but it's a practice. It's learning to sit with discomfort rather than numbing it. It's allowing people to leave your life without trying to chase them. It's trusting that even when something ends, something new is always beginning. There's a moment in everyone's life when they face loss, whether it's a person, a dream, or an old version of themselves. And in that moment, we have a choice. We can fight against reality, resisting what is in favor of what was. Or we can surrender to the flow of life, trusting that even in endings, there is beauty. Looking back, I can see that my greatest pain wasn't losing that relationship. It was the time I spent resisting the loss. The moment I stopped fighting reality, the moment I accepted that some things are meant to change, was the moment I started to find peace. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this. Maybe detachment isn't about letting go of people or things. It's about letting go of our need for control. It's about understanding that we are not the authors of every chapter in our lives. Some pages turn on their own, and that's okay. So let me ask you, what are you holding on to that's holding you back? Whatever it is, I hope you find the courage to loosen your grip. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough to set yourself free. 3. The pause and reflect technique, controlling emotional reactions. I used to think that strength meant quick reactions. Being sharp, having a comeback ready, standing my ground in every conversation. If someone cut me off in traffic, my hands would grip the wheel, my jaw would tighten, and before I knew it, my heart was pounding with frustration. If a friend said something hurtful, I'd instantly feel the sting and react before thinking, words spilling out before I could catch them. And then, later, I'd sit alone, replaying it all, wishing I had handled things differently. Maybe you've been there too. There's a split second between what happens to us and how we respond. It's tiny, almost invisible. But in that space lies a choice. One that can either deepen our suffering or set us free. I remember the moment I realized this for the first time. It wasn't in a grand, life-changing event. It was something small. An ordinary day that held an extraordinary lesson. I was sitting in a coffee shop, typing away on my laptop when I overheard a heated conversation at the next table. A woman was arguing with someone over the phone, her voice sharp, her tone edged with frustration. She sighed, muttered something under her breath, and ended the call abruptly. Then something surprising happened. She didn't storm out. She didn't immediately call someone else to vent. Instead, she put her phone down, closed her eyes, and took a long, slow breath. 1, 2, 3. She exhaled, sat still for a moment, then picked up her coffee and took a sip. Just like that, it was as if she had reset herself. And I thought, what if I did that? Because if I was being honest, I knew my own reactions were often like a reflex. Instant, automatic, and not always helpful. If someone hurt me, my first instinct was to protect myself, to say something back, to defend, to fight. But rarely did those quick reactions make things better. It reminded me of something I once read about Abraham Lincoln. He had a habit of writing what he called hot letters. Whenever he was angry at someone, he would pour all his frustration into a letter, writing everything he felt in the heat of the moment. But instead of sending it, he would set it aside. More often than not, he never sent them at all. He understood that emotions, especially strong ones, are temporary, that they pass like storms, and that waiting, just waiting, could mean the difference between a mistake and a wise decision. I decided to try it for myself. The next time I felt anger rising, when a coworker made a cutting remark in a meeting, when a friend canceled plans last minute, when life didn't go the way I expected, I paused, just for a moment. I let myself feel it, but I didn't act on it. I took a deep breath, and something changed. The intensity of the emotion softened just a little. Instead of saying the first thing that came to my mind, I gave myself time to choose better words. Instead of reacting, I responded. And those moments, those tiny pauses, started to add up. I thought about Nelson Mandela, a man who had every reason to be consumed by anger. He spent 27 years in prison, locked away for fighting against an unjust system. If anyone had the right to lash out, to be bitter, it was him. And yet, when he was finally released, he chose forgiveness. He chose wisdom over resentment. When asked how he managed to let go of the anger, he simply said, "As I walked out the door toward my freedom, I knew that if I did not leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I would still be in prison." That's the power of the pause. It doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It doesn't mean pretending you're not hurt or angry. It means giving yourself space. Space to think, to breathe, to choose a response that aligns with the person you want to be. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that most things, most words, most slights, most frustrations, don't deserve the power we give them. I won't lie and say I get it right all the time. There are still moments when I react too quickly, when words escape before I've had time to think, when my emotions get the best of me. But now I know the difference. I know that strength isn't about reacting first. It's about responding wisely. So the next time you feel a surge of emotion, try this. Pause. Take one deep breath. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? And maybe, just maybe, that small moment will change everything. Because in that pause, there is power. And the question is, how will you use it? 4. Deep breathing, a simple yet powerful emotional regulator. There was a time when I believed that controlling my emotions meant controlling everything around me. I thought if I just worked harder, planned better, anticipated every possible problem, I could avoid stress altogether. But life has a funny way of humbling us. No matter how much I tried to control my external world, there were always things beyond my grasp. Unexpected setbacks, misunderstandings, moments that blindsided me with frustration or fear. And then one day, I found myself standing in front of a crowded room about to give a presentation. My palms were clammy, my heart was pounding in my chest, and my breath was shallow, quick, and erratic. I had prepared for weeks. I knew my material, but my body had a mind of its own, betraying every ounce of nervousness I was trying to suppress. I took one look at the audience, felt the weight of their eyes on me, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I thought, I can't do this. Then I remembered something I had read about deep breathing. I didn't need to fight my fear. I didn't need to push it away. All I needed to do was breathe. So I did. I took a slow inhale through my nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Held it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhaled through my mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And just like that, something shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. My heartbeat slowed. My thoughts became clearer. I stepped onto that stage and I spoke. Not perfectly, but steadily, confidently, like myself again. I walked away from that experience realizing something profound: breath is power. It is the only thing we carry with us from the moment we are born until the day we die, and yet most of us never give it a second thought. We don't realize that it is the simplest, most accessible tool we have for regaining control when everything else feels out of our hands. The world's greatest thinkers, leaders, and visionaries have understood this. Look at Navy SEALs, some of the most highly trained individuals on the planet. They use box breathing. Inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding again. To steady their minds in high-stress situations. They don't just train their bodies, they train their breath. Because in moments of chaos, when everything is on the line, the person who can control their breathing can control their response. Look at the Dalai Lama, who starts every morning with deep, deliberate breathing and meditation, grounding himself before facing the demands of the world. Even Oprah Winfrey, someone who has sat across from some of the most brilliant minds in history, credits conscious breathing as one of the most transformative practices in her life. And yet, in our fast-paced, constantly connected world, most of us forget to breathe properly. We live in a state of shallow breathing. Chests rising and falling quickly, never fully expanding our lungs, never sending the message to our nervous system that we are safe. And so, without realizing it, our bodies remain in a constant state of low-grade stress, always bracing for something, always anticipating the next thing. But the beauty of deep breathing is that it reminds the body what the mind forgets: we are okay. We are here. We are alive. I started integrating deep breathing into my life in the simplest ways. Before an important conversation, when stuck in traffic, in the quiet moments before bed. And what I found was that breath is like an anchor. No matter how turbulent the waters of life become, no matter how strong the winds of uncertainty blow, if you can return to your breath, you can return to yourself. There's a reason why, when someone is panicking, the first thing we say is take a deep breath. It's not just a cliche. It's biology. When we breathe deeply, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which tells our body to calm down. Heart rate slows. Muscles relax. The flood of stress hormones eases. We shift from survival mode to clarity, presence, and balance. It doesn't take hours of meditation. It doesn't require a special setting or expensive equipment. All it takes is a few seconds. So, if you ever find yourself overwhelmed, whether in the middle of a stressful meeting, an argument, or just the chaos of everyday life, try this. Close your eyes. Inhale deeply through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold it for 7. Exhale slowly for 8. Feel your body settle. Do it again and again until you feel yourself come back to center. Because no matter where you are, no matter what is happening around you, your breath is always with you. And maybe, just maybe, that's all the control you really need. So here's something to think about. What would change in your life if, instead of reacting, you simply took a breath first? Try it and see what happens. 5. Letting go of judgment, the key to peaceful relationships. I used to think I was a pretty open-minded person. I believed I was kind, understanding, and fair. That is, until one day, I caught myself standing in a long checkout line at the grocery store, tapping my foot impatiently, rolling my eyes at the cashier who seemed to be moving at the speed of a sleepy turtle. Come on, I thought, how hard is it to scan a few items? Then, as I finally reached the front, I saw her hands trembling slightly as she tried to ring up my groceries. She was older, probably in her late 60s, and her face looked worn, not just with age, but with exhaustion. I felt ashamed. I had judged her without knowing anything about her. What if she was new at this job, trying to make ends meet after retirement? What if she was dealing with arthritis, pain shooting through her fingers as she handled each item? What if she had just lost someone she loved? I had let frustration turn into judgment. And in doing so, I had reduced a complex, living, breathing human being into a single word, incompetent. And I realized, this wasn't the first time I had done this. How often do we judge people based on a single moment, a single action, a single impression? We see someone lose their temper and label them rude or mean without wondering if they just had the worst day of their life. We see a person struggling financially and think irresponsible without knowing the hardships they've faced. We see someone quiet at a party and assume they're arrogant or antisocial rather than shy or deep in thought. We do it all the time, often without realizing it. And what's worse, most of us don't just judge others. We judge ourselves even more harshly. We look in the mirror and see every flaw, every imperfection, every mistake. We carry the weight of past failures and tell ourselves we're not enough. We compare our behind-the-scenes struggles to someone else's highlight reel and wonder why we can't keep up. But here's what I've come to understand. Judgment isn't truth. It's just a story we tell ourselves about someone, or about ourselves. Without knowing the full picture, I think about how often we misjudge even the people we admire. Take Albert Einstein. As a child, he was labeled slow and lazy because he didn't speak fluently until he was around 4 years old. His teachers thought he wouldn't amount to much. Imagine if he had let those judgments define him. Or Oprah Winfrey, who was told early in her career that she wasn't fit for television. She could have accepted that as truth and walked away. Instead, she rewrote the narrative. And yet, if people like Einstein and Oprah were misjudged, how many brilliant, kind, wonderful people around us are we misunderstanding every single day? How many times have we let a fleeting frustration define someone else in our minds? And how many times have we let a single mistake define ourselves? I started practicing something I call pausing before labeling. Whenever I feel myself making a snap judgment, I take a breath and ask, what if I'm wrong? What if the person who cut me off in traffic is racing to the hospital? What if the coworker who snapped at me is dealing with something painful at home? What if the person I think is ignoring me is just lost in thought? And more importantly, what if I stopped judging myself the same way? What if I treated myself with the same compassion I want to give others? I won't pretend it's easy. The mind loves categories. It loves quick explanations. But every time I catch myself in judgment and choose curiosity instead, something shifts. Patience replaces frustration. Compassion replaces irritation. Understanding replaces anger. And suddenly, the world feels a little softer. Maybe that's the secret to peaceful relationships. Not just with others, but with ourselves. So, the next time you catch yourself judging someone, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about them? And what if there's more to it than I can see? Because more often than not, there is. And the moment we remember that, the moment we let go of judgment, we create space for something much greater, understanding, connection, and peace. 6. Gratitude, transforming your mindset. I used to think that happiness was something I had to chase. That once I hit a certain milestone, landed the right job, made enough money, or found the perfect relationship, then, and only then, would I finally feel content. But the problem with that mindset is that the finish line keeps moving. I remember the exact moment I realized this. It was a cold evening and I was sitting in my car after a long, exhausting day. I had spent the past week obsessing over a promotion I didn't get, replaying the disappointment over and over in my mind. As I stared at the red glow of brake lights in traffic, I felt this overwhelming sense of frustration. Like no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man on the sidewalk. He was wearing layers of mismatched clothes, huddled against the wind, holding a cardboard sign that simply said, "Hungry." For a moment, time stopped. Here I was, sitting in a warm car, complaining to myself about a job I had, about a paycheck I received, about a life that, in so many ways, was already full of blessings. And there was this man, standing in the cold, grateful for a few spare dollars or a hot meal. I felt ashamed. Not because my problems weren't real, but because I had been so focused on what I lacked that I had completely ignored everything I had. That night, I started a gratitude journal. It felt almost silly at first. I wasn't in the habit of reflecting on what I was grateful for. I was in the habit of thinking about what needed to be fixed. But I forced myself to write down 3 things. Simple things. 1. A hot shower. 2. A best friend who always listens. 3. The way the morning light comes through my window. And something surprising happened. After a few weeks, I noticed a shift. Not in my circumstances, but in me. The same job, the same challenges, the same daily struggles. But suddenly, I wasn't just seeing the problems. I was seeing the good, too. I started noticing the warmth of my coffee in the morning, the small kindness of a stranger holding the door, the comfort of a familiar song playing on the radio. Turns out, happiness isn't about having more. It's about noticing more. There's a reason why some of the most successful people in the world swear by gratitude. Take Oprah Winfrey. She has kept a gratitude journal for decades, writing down 5 things she's grateful for every day. She credits this practice as one of the most transformative habits of her life, saying, "If you look at what you have in life, you'll always have more. If you look at what you don't have, you'll never have enough." Or Jim Carrey, who, before becoming famous, would write himself imaginary checks for millions of dollars, not because he was greedy, but because he believed in visualizing and appreciating what was possible. Years later, he cashed a real check for $10 million for Dumb and Dumber. Even neuroscientists have backed this up. Gratitude physically rewires the brain, strengthening the neural pathways associated with positive thinking. In other words, the more we practice gratitude, the easier it becomes to feel joy. But gratitude isn't just about appreciating what's easy. The hardest, but most powerful form of gratitude is learning to be thankful for challenges, failures, and setbacks. Not because they're enjoyable, but because they shape us in ways comfort never could. I think about people like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison and still emerged with a spirit of forgiveness and gratitude. When asked how he survived, he said, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." Gratitude is what allows us to see that even in our struggles, there is something to be gained. I won't pretend this is always easy. Some days, life knocks the wind out of us, and the last thing we want to do is sit down and list reasons to be thankful. But maybe those are the days when we need it the most. Maybe gratitude isn't about ignoring pain, but about refusing to let pain be the only thing we see. So, let me ask you this. If you could only keep the things you were grateful for today, what would still be in your life tomorrow? Think about it, and start noticing, because the more you look for things to be grateful for, the more you'll realize they've been there all along. 7. Loving kindness meditation. Cultivating compassion. There was a time when I thought kindness was something you either had or you didn't. Some people were naturally compassionate, effortlessly patient, always able to see the best in others. And then there were the rest of us, the ones who held on to grudges, who struggled to forgive, who found it easier to judge than to understand. I was one of those people. For most of my life, I believed in fairness. If someone hurt me, I carried that wound, tucked it away like a badge of proof that I had been wronged. I wasn't cruel, but I was cautious. I had my list of people I liked and my list of people I didn't, and I rarely let anyone switch sides. Then something happened that changed everything. It wasn't dramatic. There was no life-altering betrayal, no heartbreaking loss. It was something simple, almost embarrassingly so. I was at a cafe, waiting in line to order coffee, when a man in front of me snapped at the barista. His tone was sharp, impatient, his words cutting. I felt the irritation rise in my chest immediately. How hard is it to be polite? I thought, why do people have to be like this? But then I noticed something. His hands were shaking as he reached for his wallet. His face was pale, drawn, and suddenly I saw it. He wasn't just an impatient man. He was a man who was struggling. Maybe he had just received terrible news. Maybe he hadn't slept in days. Maybe life was simply weighing on him in a way I couldn't understand. And then another thought hit me. How many times have I been him? How many times had I been short with someone because I was overwhelmed? How many times had I carried my pain so close to the surface that it spilled out onto others? That was the moment I realized something profound. Compassion is not about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. The next day, I stumbled across something called metta meditation, or loving kindness meditation. The idea was simple. You sit quietly, close your eyes, and repeat phrases of goodwill. First to yourself, then to someone you love, then to a stranger, and finally to someone you struggle with. I tried it. First, it felt strange. whispering, "May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe." To myself felt awkward, like I was trying too hard to believe it, but I kept going. I imagined a friend, sent the same words to them. Then someone neutral, like the barista who made my coffee. Then came the hard part. I pictured someone I resented, someone who had hurt me, disappointed me, made my life difficult. My chest tightened. I didn't want to wish them well. I wanted to hold onto my anger, but I took a deep breath, and I said the words anyway. "May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe." Something shifted. It wasn't immediate and it wasn't magical. But slowly, day after day, the weight of my anger started to lessen. I wasn't condoning what had happened. I wasn't pretending the hurt wasn't real. But I was choosing to let go of the suffering that came with holding on to it. I started seeing people differently. The impatient driver who cut me off, maybe he was rushing to see a loved one in the hospital. The rude coworker who always seemed to have an attitude, maybe she was going through something I didn't know about. The friend who stopped calling, maybe they were struggling in ways they didn't know how to explain. And most importantly, I started seeing myself differently. Because the truth is, we can't give to others what we don't first give to ourselves. If we're constantly criticizing ourselves, holding ourselves to impossible standards, refusing to extend kindness inward, how can we possibly offer it outward? Even the Dalai Lama, one of the most compassionate figures in the world, practices loving-kindness meditation daily. He once said, "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion." And science backs this up. Studies have shown that people who practice loving-kindness meditation experience less anxiety, lower stress, and even improved physical health. It changes the brain, rewiring it to be more naturally compassionate. But beyond the science, beyond the philosophy, I have felt this firsthand. One of the most unexpected things about practicing compassion is that it doesn't just change how you see others. It changes how you experience life. You start noticing beauty in people you once ignored. You start finding patience where there used to be frustration. You start feeling a lightness in your heart where there used to be weight. And isn't that what we're all searching for? So here's something to think about. Who in your life needs compassion right now? Someone else, or maybe even yourself? And if you're willing, take a moment today. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and whisper the words, "May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe." Say it to yourself. Say it to someone you love. Say it to someone who has hurt you, and then watch what happens. 8. Practicing simplicity, the path to mental clarity. There was a time in my life when I thought more meant better. More success, more achievements, more possessions. I filled my days with tasks, my shelves with things, my mind with endless to-do lists. I told myself that busyness was proof of importance, that owning more meant I had made it, that saying yes to everything would lead me somewhere meaningful. But instead of feeling fulfilled, I felt exhausted. One day, I came home after a long, stressful day and looked around my apartment. The overflowing bookshelf, the closet packed with clothes I never wore, the emails piling up in my inbox. It all felt suffocating. It wasn't just my home that was cluttered. My mind was cluttered, too. I realized something that night. I was drowning in excess. Not just physical stuff, but mental noise, distractions, obligations, unnecessary stress. And it was stealing my peace. So I did something radical. I started letting go. I pulled out a box and began filling it with things I no longer needed. Books I'd never read again, clothes that no longer felt like me, trinkets that once seemed important but now only collected dust. It was harder than I expected. Every item had a story, a memory, an excuse for why I should keep it. But with each thing I placed in that box, I felt lighter. It wasn't just about decluttering my space. It was about creating room for what actually mattered. There's a reason why Buddhist monks live with so little. It's not because they don't appreciate beauty or comfort. It's because they understand that when you own less, you're owned by less. Every extra thing we accumulate comes with invisible weight. The more we have, the more we have to maintain, organize, worry about. And most of it, we don't even need. I think about Steve Jobs, who famously wore the same black turtleneck and jeans every day. He simplified his wardrobe not because he didn't care about style, but because he wanted to eliminate one unnecessary decision from his day, saving his mental energy for things that truly mattered. Or Marie Kondo, who built an entire philosophy around asking, "Does this spark joy?" She understood that simplicity isn't about deprivation. It's about making space for what enriches your life. But simplicity isn't just about stuff. It's about how we spend our time, our energy, our attention. For years, I was addicted to busyness. I filled my schedule to the brim, afraid that if I slowed down, I'd fall behind. But when I started simplifying, I began asking myself, do I really need to say yes to this? Is this adding to my life or draining it? Am I doing this because I want to or because I feel obligated to? And with every unnecessary commitment I let go of, I reclaimed a little more peace. I started turning off notifications that didn't matter, unsubscribing from emails that cluttered my inbox, letting go of relationships that only brought stress. And something amazing happened. I found mental clarity. I had more time for the things that actually mattered. Conversations that filled my soul, walks in nature, deep work instead of scattered multitasking. And I realized something profound. Simplicity is freedom. It's the freedom to focus, the freedom to breathe, the freedom to be fully present, rather than constantly chasing the next thing. And the truth is, most of us are carrying too much. Physically, mentally, emotionally. So what if you started letting go? What if you cleared out the clutter in your home, your schedule, your mind? What would be left? Maybe, just maybe, the only things that truly matter. Closing segment. A life of emotional freedom. Take a moment and reflect on everything we've discussed. What if, starting today, you no longer let your emotions dictate your actions? What if, instead, you became the master of your inner world, responding to challenges with wisdom and grace, rather than being tossed around by impulse and reactivity? Because here's the truth. Emotions aren't your enemy. They are your greatest teachers. Every surge of anger, every wave of sadness, every moment of anxiety, it's all an opportunity to deepen your understanding of yourself. By practicing mindfulness, you can become aware of your emotions without letting them consume you. By cultivating detachment, you can find peace even in uncertain times. By embracing gratitude and compassion, you can transform even the most difficult moments into opportunities for growth. This is the essence of emotional mastery, and it's not something you achieve overnight. It's a lifelong practice, one that unfolds moment by moment, choice by choice. So, let me leave you with this question. What is one small step you can take today to cultivate greater emotional mastery in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your reflections. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Lotus Light Teachings so we can continue this journey together. Your emotions don't have to control you. You have the power to transform them. And in doing so, you can transform your life. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay mindful, stay compassionate, and stay free.